$1, $2 horse at my table on Full Tilt Poker. And in this hand, it was on the big blind. I'm going to play it a little bit aggressively. I flopped a straight draw. And it hasn't worked. So now I have to go to plan B and try to suck out. That did not do it. I could try a bluff here, which against some players, I'm going to try a bluff raise in this spot. But unfortunately, it was the ace. So if they had the nut flush draw, they hit the ace on the river. And they're not going to get bluffed out. That's my small blind with 9-4 offsuit. Not a great hand, but it hasn't been raised, and there's a couple of other dead blinds, live blinds. And I flopped a very nice hand. I'm going to check here and hopefully give people a chance to catch a card on the turn. Someone with a king might bet. Probably just going to call if they do bet. Because I want other players to call and hit a pair on the turn. And I'm going to go for the check raise here with the double bet. There's some chance that the other player, since they had I'm going to bet here on the river. They'll probably have to call if they have a king. And they fold it. I got 4-7 offsuit. I'm going to play about half my hands on the button. 4-7 offsuit's not in the top half of hands. I'm going to let that one go. 9-9-4-6. I try to play about the same percentage of hands in Omaha as I do in Hold'em. It's a little bit harder, of course, because there's so many different hands in Omaha. In Hold'em, it's a lot easier. There's only 169 different hands. In Omaha, there's like 20,000 different hands. When you consider you're going to have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 cards of the same suit. I got ace, deuce, jack 5 of diamonds. That's a good enough hand to play in this spot, especially since it's been folded to me. Definitely in the top 10% or so of hands. Raised, I got one caller on the flop. I like the continuation bet in this situation. Now I have the nut low and a pair. I don't want to get raised. If I get raised here, there's a good chance that I was only getting half the pot. Now here I still got nut low. He didn't raise me. He probably doesn't have me beat. My 2-pair might actually get the whole pot, and it did. Can we see what he had? He ended up having, he had deuce 4 jack king. Double suited. Given that I raised, it's a marginal hand to call with, but it's double suited is very important because it gives you a lot of extra outs, especially when you're heads up. When you're not heads up, you want to be suited, but you want to be suited with an ace or a king, mostly an ace, because they're so likely that your opponent is, well, because it's so often when you hit your flush, somebody else hits a flush too. You want to have the bigger flush. But when you're heads up, it doesn't happen as often. So it's okay to play the smaller flushes in Omaha high-low because sometimes you can have a low and then end up making the flush to go with it. Even though it's a small flush, it adds a lot of value to your hand when you're heads up. And in Omaha, it's about having a two-way hand, about scooping the whole pot, not just making the low. If you have a hand evaluator and you run some of the hands, you can notice some very surprising things to some people. Now here I have Jack, Jack, Queen 3. A lot of beginning players are going to be tempted to play it. This is an easy fold. It's, even though I have the suited, it's really a one-way hand. I'm hoping for a big flop. If you flop a set in Omaha, it's so easy to get beaten by a straight or a flush. Even in this flop, I would have flopped a set of jacks, but there's a flush draw and a low draw out there. Straight draws, of course. I mean, someone could have King, Queen 10 with King, Queen of Hearts and be roughly even money with me, especially if somebody else has a low draw. Now, as it turns out, a low came in, a flush came in, a straight came in. I might end up having to call here on the river with my set of jacks and not really liking it. So those medium pocket pairs, small medium pocket pairs, are not playable unless you have something else to go with it. Now 5, 6, 8 jack, pretty much an unplayable hand. There are not very many playable hands for raise unless you're in the big blind, that don't include at least one ace in your hand. Now in Omaha, if you have ace-deuce, almost every ace-deuce is worth playing. Occasionally you might want to throw it away if there's a raise and a re-raise from both type players in early position. Then you figure at best, if your ace-deuce hits, you're going to get a quarter of the pot. Now if you have like ace-king, deuce-3 double suited, that's a hand that you're going to play for many bets. And those double suited adds a lot. And you have the 3 as the backup, just in case you get counterfeited. Okay, now in the big blind I play very loose. Might even play this hand for a raise, if there is a raise. But it's actually a very questionable hand. Pair of deuces. You know what? This is, there's very, very little value to playing this hand in this spot. And just for the sake of encouraging people to give up hands in that situation, it was a rainbow hand. Pocket deuces is not worth much, especially because when you have a pocket pair and it's a low hand, when you hit your set, it's way more likely that a low is going to get there and maybe even make a low straight. Now, I would have flopped 2 pair, but by the river, I hate my hand. And I would have ended up winning. But given the cards that were out there, I don't really mind my hand. Now, this hand I like a lot better than the deuce-deuce, queen-10 rainbow. I got some suited possibility. Hasn't been raised. I'm going to call for the 50 cents. I'm getting 11-to-1 pot odds. I flopped 2 pair, bottom 2 pair. That's a very marginal hand in Omaha high-low. In Omaha, even. Any form of Omaha. Very vulnerable hand. You don't want to put a lot of money in. If there was a bet and a raise, I'd fold it automatically. Now a low comes out, a possible straight is out. There's a flush draw, 2 flush draws, any red card, and there's a flush out there. Someone might already have a low or a straight, and I can't really call with my 2 pair. I do have a gut shot straight draw, but I can't call. Now if this hand was heads up, I might call, thinking that my 2 pair might be good, I might hit a straight. But with a bet and 4 callers, there's no way my hand is good, and I just don't have the right pot odds to call in that spot, especially since I'm probably calling for half the pot. Now I got checked around on the river. The board paired, so my 2 pair is even worse. I got counterfeited again. So, right now I expect there to be an ace-3 for low, maybe an ace-deuce, but probably ace-3 and 3 sevens. So there were 2 ace-deuces and the high was 3 sevens full of 6s. So I was really far behind. I needed a 6 to win in that spot. No, I needed a 4 to win in that spot. My 6 wouldn't have been any good. Now I have king, 4, 5, 6. Not a hand that I'm going to play in any situation. If it was folded to me on the button and I was double suited with that hand, I would raise to steal. But facing a raise, even against one player, I'm not going to play the hand. Now if I was in the big blind and there was just one raise, I would call and see the flop. Now I have one of the few hands with an ace that really isn't worth playing. There's only one low card. It's a 7. It's not likely to help your hand. It's rainbow. There's no flush possibility. And remember, in Omaha, you have to use 2. There's some high possibilities, but with the ace-jack, instead of having an ace-king, if I do hit an ace, I'm likely to get dominated, beaten by somebody that has ace-king. So I decided to fold that hand. This is another hand that is tempted to limp with. And, I'll call here. I actually like this hand a little bit better, even though it doesn't have a low card to go with it. I have no chance of making a low. But that ace-7 low probably wasn't going to win anyway. This is a much better hand, high for high, because I have all those extra straight cards. If I have a king and queen on the flop, I have a nice big wrap. There are a lot of other hands, flops I could hit. It's not a hand that I would play for a raise, and it's not a hand that I would play against tough opponents. just not really worth it. But, you know, if you're bored, you haven't played a hand in a while, and you get really bad opponents, you might play it. Not that these are really bad players. Now, obviously, I've completely missed the flop. Yeah, I was hoping for high cards. Pretty much almost any flop with high cards I'm gonna like to some degree. I could get myself into trouble. Now, it's time to switch gears again. We're playing Raz. Raz, you want to start normally with 3 cards, 8 or lower, each of them. The best hand is ace, 3, 4, 5. Straights and flushes don't matter. They don't count against you. And in this situation, the 3-headed monkey should have folded there no matter what they started with. Now Raz is, there's 2 parts to the game. One is stealing on 3rd Street, and then the next after that is playing for value on 4th and 5th, knowing when to continue on, and just playing the math. Putting your opponent on a range of hands, and figure out how your hand does against their range of hands. You know, when obviously they're usually going to start with low cards in the hole, and they catch a low card. There's some chance that it paired them up, but it's more likely that it didn't. It's important to pay attention to all the up cards that get folded, because you want to know how likely it is that your opponents paired their hand, and also how likely it is that your hand will improve. And there are times when I will make a decision on how I play on 3rd Street, or whether I play, based on those up cards. If my hand is live, meaning the cards I have in my hand are duplicated in the other player's up card, it's much more favorable than when my hand is dead. Now I have ace, 3, 5, very favorable, very good starting hand. 3 cards, 5 or lower, all different, is one of the best starting hands you can have. Ace, 2, 3 obviously is the best. Now notice if there's a 4 and a deuce, those are the only low cards out. Now in this situation I just won the antes, which is going to happen a lot. And that's worthwhile, playing for the antes. Okay, so here's a situation. If it's folded to me, I might raise here just to try and steal. When there's only 1 low up card tacked after you, you know, sometimes it's a good time to try and steal. In this situation, I got re-raised. I don't have anything. I just have a bad chance at making a 9, unless I run 4 perfect cards, so I'll fold in that spot. But given the size of the antes, $1.40 in antes, 7-handed, it only cost me $1 plus another 20. Plus there's another 25 cents in there. I'm risking $1 to win $1.65. Doesn't have to work very often for your steal to be correct, the right move, no matter what you have. And in that spot, I don't think my opponent is going to call me or raise me more than about half the time. Some of the time, my opponents are just going to call, and I'm going to catch a 3, and they'll catch a king, and I'm going to bet and win it right there too. So, because of all that, I think at least until your opponents pick up on it, you can raise when there's 1 low card to come with almost any hand. Now, you probably want to fold a little bit because you don't want them to be coming after you with anything. You know, that was probably a marginal hand there that I probably should have folded. Now, a lot of players make a mistake when they see 2 low cards in the hole. They decide to play it for a raise, even though they have a face card up. In this spot, it's just unplayable against 2 opponents, plus the first player raised looking at a couple low cards. So you got to give them a lot of respect. Position is very important in Raz, just like it is in Hold'em. And here it's the position, how many low cards are left to act after you. So now there's 2 low cards to go, and I got a 9. This is a good hand. It's half a semi-bluff and half a value hand. I think I'm going to have the best hand a little less than half the time, but I'm also likely to just win the pot right here. If I do get called, there's a good chance my opponent catches a 10 or higher, and I can actually pick up the lead. Now in this spot, sometimes if I actually started out with a good hand, I might take a card off. If I had started out with 2, 3, 6, I might call. But in this spot, there's no way I'm going to call because I'm looking at going for a 9 at best, and my opponent could have 4 cards to an 8 or even better. Even if my opponent is paired up, I'm not in a great spot in that hand. Now, it's important when you're playing H.O.R.S.E to recognize that the game switched, and when you go from Raz to stud high, the bring-in changes. So you always want to pay attention to the bring-in. Another thing I do is every now and then I look up at the top and see how many hands we are into the game, so I know I'm prepared ahead of time and it's not a surprise when the game changed. Now in stud high, suits matter too. Suits can be pretty important because your opponents might be going after a flush, and you want to know both how likely they are to be going after it, how likely they are to hit it, and also when you're deciding whether to play a hand or how to play it, you want to know how live your hand is. So you want to know, if you start with 3 hearts, you want to look around and see how many other hearts are out. Okay, so now here I've got a 3 flush, Jack 10 deuce. There are 2 hearts out, and it's important to pay attention to that. And there's another Jack out. In this spot, I'm going to raise here, and it's both. I'm hoping actually just to pick up the pot right here, and if I don't, I have the flush to back it up. Another thing is I had the deuce in my hand, which makes it less likely that the bring-in that was the deuce actually has a hand. So there might be some situations where you might want to steal if your table is playing tight. It's important that they have to be playing tight. You want to steal based on your down cards, making it less likely that one of the players left to act is going to have a hand that they can play against you. Now that's a secondary thing, but if you can pick up the antes every now and then, once an hour or two, based just on that, then you're doing pretty well. You're adding a lot to your expectation and also making it a lot harder for your opponents to read you, because they know that sometimes you're going to be raising with garbage, absolute garbage. In this case, I'm starting with absolute garbage. Now in stud, very often the highest up card is going to raise. In this case, the ace of diamond raised. There was another ace out, making it more likely that they actually have a real hand, the first ace, because they have to worry about the next ace to play. Now, did you notice that there were a couple of 10s that folded? The ace of diamonds got a 10. If you're playing against them, now you got to think, okay, it's unlikely that card really helped them. When you catch an ace, it's a good time to bet and hopefully just pick it up right there. Now you paired your door card. No matter what I start with in this hand, I'm going to be betting. Now the river, max power did call a bet on the turn. So you have to be worried about it. And let's see if he actually started with anything. The last hand feature is a great feature. So he started, the best he could have had is ace king 5. Caught a 10 of spades on 5th Street, which didn't really help him. And then caught a 4 of hearts. So at this point, and then he called the bet. So I would probably have to assume that he had ace 3-5 to start with. Caught a gut shot draw to call the bet. And actually that was a bet he probably shouldn't have called at that point. Now I got split 5s, looking around with a queen, and looking around at all my cards are live. And that's good. I also have 2 diamonds in the hole, so if I pick up 3 diamonds, I'm going to make the flush. And that's very useful. Now, the king raised, very likely that they've got nothing. They're trying to steal. She-Huns probably have some kind of hand, but decided not to re-raise, so they probably don't have a big pair. I usually would like to re-raise in that kind of spot. Now, king 7 is probably going to check here. Caught a dead 7. I really starting to like my hand. I picked up the king of diamonds, which other than a 5 or a queen was probably the best card. An ace of diamonds would have been better. Now, I caught another 7. That means that She-Huns started with a pair of 7s. They can't catch a third one. And it was very likely that I was going to pick up the pot right there. Plus, if I did have the worst hand, I still had a lot of outs. Okay, so the ace just called. And the queen raised. 10 raised. Bring in folds. And the ace calls. We got an open pair of aces. Very weak call there, and now they just checked. They let it get checked around. And I'm almost suspicious that poker chips have Poker Chicks 5 has 4 aces. But you're never really going to put anybody on that. I mean, the way that they played the hand out, they didn't raise on 3rd, they didn't bet 4th, and then finally max power 31. Wow, aces full of kings. That's a pretty big hand. and max power 31 did have queens. Okay, so now, in stud, the hands are pretty close in value. When you have like 3 overcards to a pair, it's close to 50-50 like in Hold'em, depending on exactly what your hand is. Plus, it's hard for your opponents to play against you because they got to be worried that you have a bigger pair. Now, I caught an 8, which is a bad card for me. They don't necessarily know that. If I catch another 8, I'm probably going to win the pot right there. And there are a lot of other cards I can catch to win. Now, here I have a decision. Do I want to check and get the free card or bet, try to win it right away? It's actually a close situation because they caught the ace of diamonds. In this spot, I'm going to check because I want to avoid the check raise. Now I caught an ace. If they did make an ace, then I either caught up or I have enough where I have another card to catch. Okay, now I have split ace with a king. There's another king out. There's no aces or out. There's only one other overcard to my 8s. So I'm going to raise here. I won't really mind just winning the pot right here. $1.65 win isn't bad. And the king folded. That's the only hand I was really, really worried about because I don't want to play against 2 kings. I don't want to play against 2 jacks either, but it's not that bad because I have the overcard, the king. And it's also a lot easier to beat jacks. If I catch a queen or an ace, I have another overcard. So the card didn't help me, but my opponents don't look like they got any help either. So I'm going to continue to bet. Now I made 2 pair. It should be kind of obvious that I've got 9s and 8s. My opponent had started with a jack of diamonds, caught a diamond on 5th Street, caught another one on 6th Street. I'm gonna check here. See what happens. Often, I'd like to bet and know what they're doing. You know what? I think I might check again and let them bet. And they didn't bet. They actually had a pair of jacks. So I missed a bet. I saved the bet and then missed a bet.